Last time on this channel, we had a little look at Fatal Labyrinth, Sega's 16-bit roguelike that started out as an online-only Meganet title in 1990, before being released to the masses a year later. At the tail end of 1990, Dragon Crystal dropped on the Game Gear in Japan, the following year in other regions. A Master System port would follow in 91, but this thing only saw the light of day in Europe. Dragon Crystal is Fatal Labyrinth, with a few tweaks. The visuals are much more organic and colorful here. Instead of rummaging around cold, dark dungeons, our little guy explores fantasy forests. Personally, I'm a bigger fan of the Mega Drive Genesis game setting. It just, makes more sense, but it's all about the gameplay when it comes to these randomly generated death boxes, and Dragon Crystal delivers on that. For those who missed our Fatal Labyrinth review, I'll do a brief recap. In a nutshell, these are early examples of roguelike video games. Everything is randomly generated, from the stages to all of the items. This time around, the weapons come with stats, and there aren't any shields or helmets, and all of the other stuff is a mystery until it has been used at least once. It's a new adventure every time, which has led to endless hours of entertainment for me. This time around, you're accompanied by an egg that eventually hatches into a useless dragon, and I'm not really sure what the point of this is. It does nothing to help you out throughout the entire quest, but still, it's there. Like its predecessor, there are 30 stages to complete. Instead of staircases leading you to floors, portals transport you to the next level. Other than that, the goal is the exact same. Rubbing up against the boundaries reveals more of the map. Hidden pathways can be exposed with a push of the action button, and it's up to you to increase the overall abilities of your character before pushing forward. A map has been introduced hidden away in one of the random items, which is a bit helpful, but navigating the environments was never really a problem. It's the monsters that make these games tricky, and boy, did they not ease up on the difficulty here. Dragon Crystal is damn tough at times. A large amount of the challenge has to do with the randomly generated enemies and items, sure, but what makes it worse is that everything seems out to get ya. Food is still a thing, but it's no longer possible to eat yourself into an early grave. Like, I get it, they wanted this cartoony fantasy game to be as realistic as possible, but I think noshing on grass meat could have been eliminated entirely for this prequel-sequel Dragon Mummy Simulator. It doesn't really add anything to the overall gameplay, and simply serves as one more annoying status effect to keep track of. This was something I glossed over in the Fatal Labyrinth review, but it just starts to get tedious having to keep an eye on your hunger meter. It wasn't as big of a deal in that one, but here it drains so quickly. I'm not sure if I was getting dealt lousy hands while playing the handheld version, but it seemed much more obnoxious here. Every time I'd find some snazzy new duds or get ahead in any way when it came to useful items, a goddamned shinobi would lift them off of me. Dragon Crystal is satisfying when the dice roll is in the player's favor, but a miserable experience when it's not. My point is, this isn't the type of game for everybody. It's cruel and punishing, almost to an unnecessary degree, but I can't help but enjoy how much of a hateful asshole it can be. It's a risk-reward type of game. On top of stealing your goods, baddies can also rust your armor, inflict paralyzing status effects, and even set you back a class. It's easier than ever to run past everything with the tap of the start button to toggle a sprint on the Master System, or by holding it down in the portable alternative, but avoiding skirmishes won't level you up. Grinding is possible, but it doesn't take long for everything to go south. Continues are available once again, but this time they are purchased with the game's currency. Fortunately, these sacks of gold are everywhere and you'll be spat out on the same level instead of every fifth. Naturally, everything will be randomized once again, but it's easier than ever to reshuffle the deck to hopefully get dealt a better hand. There is a penalty though, as you'll only respawn with the weapon and armor you had when you kicked the bucket. It's fine because items are everywhere, but if you were sitting on some health potions or pots, as they're called in the Game Gear version, it could ruin your run. The story is basically Gremlins. You're a kid who finds a crystal at an out-of-the-way antique shop. While staring into it, you're transported to this nightmare world with an egg incubating a pylon of a dragon following behind. I'm not one for endless narrative dumps in video games, but this thing doesn't even try. Someone saw Joe Dante's classic half a decade before and scribbled some nonsense down to fill out an instruction manual. It's lazy and things don't really pay off in any way. You could pretty much develop your own story for this game and have it be just as effective. I'm not complaining because I couldn't care either way, but if you're expecting an RPG plot to play out, you'll be disappointed. From what I can tell, Ifugu returned to compose these scores, but both soundtracks are different. Like Fatal Labyrinth, the themes are quite short, so they loop quickly, but these ditties are as catchy as those from the 16-bit Big Brother alternative. Ultimately, it all boils down to personal preference, and I don't want to sound like I'm waffling too much here, but I can't decide which version I prefer. The Game Gear has a more traditional fantasy flavor with darker melodies, but part of me really digs the upbeat, poppy sounds on the Master System. Game Gear presentation is nice and clean without any clutter. If you leave your little guy idle for more than a nanosecond, he gets impatient, so it's best to hold that start button and get motoring. Potions have been renamed to pots here, which is a weird little change. Rings, books, and canes make up the rest of the collectible items, all identifiable by color. When infected, it takes a fraction of the time to recover when compared to Fatal Labyrinth, but I did find a few of the rings a bit frustrating as they put an extremely long curse on you. The visuals are passable. These early roguelike RPGs aren't exactly remarkable to look at, but armor shows up on the character and the monsters look fine. A lot of them have been borrowed from Fatal Labyrinth, but they've been swapped around. Some late-game baddies from the 16-bit castle floors appear earlier, and vice versa. This time around, your cash won't buy a better tombstone or friends upon death, but there's a nice little screen that tallies up your gold. I like how the boundaries change a bit when they've been interacted with. It makes it easier to tell where you've been, plus, it just looks cool. There aren't many changes when it comes to the Master System alternative. For whatever reason, I found it noticeably easier to get to the higher stages, but this could have been a random fluke. I've been playing both of these games for years and have always preferred this console version. The camera is pulled out a bit more, revealing a lot more screen real estate, which makes it easier to anticipate altercations. Personally, I think Dragon Crystal on the Master System plays the best out of all of these early roguelike Sega titles. I still prefer the castle setting in Fatal Labyrinth, but this 8-bit game feels the most balanced. Unfortunately, these games are pretty pricey these days. An updated release was added to the 3DS, but I'm not sure if that one's still available. A proper sequel, Dragon Crystal 2, was available through the Sonic Cafe service, but was shut down in 2012. From what I know, there aren't any plans to re-release any of these games, and they're not exactly easy to find. Hopefully a future collection will include them in some fashion. They're not the best games out there, but I've always had a ton of fun popping them on to get a quick round in. Like I said in our Fatal Labyrinth review, these are relaxing little time dumps made even better while baked. Chill, nice to look at, and easy to get hooked on. Next time on this channel, something completely different, so stay tuned.
I'm sorry. Mogwai not for sale.